What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to InvestQ. And I got a pretty interesting video for a stock we haven't covered or talked about in a while, and it's none other than Rocket Lab, ticker symbol RKLB. And what we're going to be talking about is, well, first off, let's just say that the stock has been hit pretty decently hard as of recently, because when you look at the stretch of seven consecutive days in a row, you will notice that it has slid quite an amount. Per the article, it shows Rocket Lab's stock slides 19% over straight down days, and this was posted today on August 27th of 2026. Now, while the stock price has been moving lower, Rocket Lab did recently report their quarterly earnings for Q3 of 2026, and it does show that we saw some pretty positive things. Again, there was record quarterly revenue. They got record backlog. They have continuous progression regarding Neutron, and it's also attempting a massive acquisition of Iridium Communications that could significantly change what this company looks like. So what I want to do today is go through the actual numbers, what management has been saying, the recent stock price weakness. I want to also talk about Neutron, Iridium, and some of the risks that I think investors need to understand, because there are definitely things here that I personally find interesting. But there are also some pretty major execution risks that I don't think should be ignored. So let's talk about it in today's video. In quick disclosure, the paid promotion label that you saw on the top left of your screen in the first 10 seconds of the video refers only to affiliate promotions on this channel. None of the companies that I cover pay me for my stock analysis. Everything discussed is based on publicly available information, my own research and opinions, and none of this is financial advice. I also want to make something extremely clear that I do not guarantee the future results of Rocket Lab or any other company. I do not guarantee stock performance, future stock prices, investment gains, profitability, successful launches, acquisitions, contracts, or any other future outcomes. Companies can miss expectations, projects can get delayed, contracts can change, acquisitions can fail to close, and stock prices can move significantly in either direction. And everything we're discussing today comes from publicly available sources on the internet, including Rocket Lab's own financial results and investor materials, along with third-party reporting and analysis that I will identify throughout the video. And any forward-looking statements discussed in this video should be viewed as a possibility or expectation, not a guarantee. So always do your own due diligence and your own research and make your own financial decisions. Now, with all that out of the way, let's just real quick get into the sell-off. Let's start off there. So I want to actually start with the stock, the way that's been sliding recently with the price action, because this is probably what a lot of Rocket Lab investors are thinking about right now. And again, right now, Rocket Lab is currently trading at $66.32, having a pretty neutral day right now. It's only up 14 cents and pretty neutral. It's technically up less than 1%, less than 0.5% at 0.21%. But anyways, according to the Terrace article that was published today, Rocket Lab had fell for 7 consecutive trading days. And over that 7-day period, it has slid 19%. And for comparison, Terrace reported the S&P 500 was down only around 0.9% over the same period. And if you zoom out further, the article showed that Rocket Lab has been down approximately 55.9% over the preceding 3 months. Now, those numbers, while those numbers may seem pretty significant, and obviously, the numbers obviously change as time goes on and the stock continues to trade. So I'm specifically referencing the figures in the article here. And I don't think a falling stock price by itself tells us whether a company is good or bad. It also doesn't mean that the stock has to rebound. But for me, the question that I'm more interested in, it has something more along to do with the fundamentals, and if anything has fundamentally changed with Rocket Lab's business. And that's where the latest earnings report gets kind of interesting, because according to Rocket Lab, again, you can just see it right there on the headlines about how they posted record revenue and they have a record backlog. Again, their revenue was at approximately $234 million, which is a 62% increase year over year. Again, that's comparing it to 144.5% in Q2 of 2025. And more importantly, Rocket Lab described this as a record quarterly revenue result. And for the first 6 months of 2026, Rocket Lab generated approximately $434.4 million in revenue compared with approximately $267.1 million during the same period last year for the first 6 months of 2025. So whatever the stock has been doing recently, the stock performance with the share price, regardless of what's been happening recently, the underlying business has continued growing its top line substantially. And also another number that stood out to me was regarding gross profit, because Rocket Lab reported approximately $84.6 million in GAAP gross profit during Q2 of 2026. And that's comparing it with approximately $46.4 million in the year ago quarter, so for Q2 of 2025. And Rocket Lab's non-GAAP profit was approximately $97 million, representing a 41.5% non-GAAP gross margin compared with 36.9% in Q2 of 2025. Now, I want you to remember that GAAP and non-GAAP measures are not interchangeable. And Rocket Lab itself provides reconciliations explaining the adjustments behind its non-GAAP numbers. But I think both are useful to look at because we're not only seeing revenue increase, we are also seeing some improvement in the economics of that revenue. However, here's what I want to point out to balance this out. Even though we saw those positive developments, we got to also take into consideration the losses, because Rocket Lab is still currently, it's not consistently profitable yet, because the company reported a Q2 GAAP operating loss of approximately $57.5 million. And interestingly, that's only a slight improvement from the approximately $59.6 million in operating loss in Q2 of 2025. So $57.5 million is Q2 of this year, and $59.6 million operating loss was in Q2 of 2025. Now, Rocket Lab also reported a net loss of approximately $49.3 million, comparing that with approximately $66.4 million just 1 year earlier. And adjusted EBITDA came in at a loss of approximately $8.8 million, comparing it with an adjusted EBITDA loss of roughly $27.6 million in Q2 of 2025. So there has been substantial improvement on that adjusted metric, but it's still negative, and that's an important part of this story. Now, let's get into one of the biggest numbers in the entire earnings report, and that's that big backlog, because again, the record backlog is at $2.36 million, which is a 137% increase year over year. And Rocket Lab also reported securing more than $437 million in new launch contracts across Electron, HASTE, and Neutron during Q2 and through subsequent signings. Now, that pushed Rocket Lab's total launch backlog to more than 90 launches, which the company described it as its highest level ever. Now, I think that's significant, but there is an important distinction to make here. And I've talked about this numerous times, especially for those of you that tune in frequently regarding Castellum CTM, a stock that we also cover in this channel. Feel free to check out in previous videos below and on my channel. But backlog is not the same thing as recognized revenue. And the $2.36 billion doesn't mean Rocket Lab has already earned $2.36 billion. Like, the backlog is there, but that doesn't mean that it's recognized revenue right now. What it does represent is contracted future business that is expected to convert over time, and subject to timing, contract terms, and other factors regarding execution. So I would never treat backlog as guaranteed future revenue, but I do think this gives us a useful indication of the amount of contracted business Rocket Lab currently has lined up. And we're seeing some pretty large government-related opportunities inside this business, because Rocket Lab has highlighted a $397 million contract involving multiple Flatellite spacecraft for the U.S. Space Force's Space-Based Airborne Moving Target Indicator Program. Let me highlight that right there. And then Rocket Lab also highlighted awards totaling more than $160 million to build 3 geostationary satellites. Oh, right there. And the company is also expected to launch them using Neutron, and that's where the broader Rocket Lab strategy starts becoming clearer. Now, Rocket Lab, it isn't just a rocket company anymore, and one of the biggest things that I've learned going through all this research is that I don't look at Rocket Lab purely as a launch company, especially when you look at the whole story, because Rocket Labs describes itself as an end-to-end space company, because you've got things like Electron, you've got HASTE, you've potentially Neutron as well, you've got spacecraft, satellite components, government programs, and increasingly Rocket Lab appears to be trying to control more pieces of the entire space infrastructure stack. Now, according to Rocket Lab, its satellite and components have already powered more than 1,700 missions in Earth orbit, along with deep space missions. And this is where the proposed Iridium acquisition becomes extremely interesting, because Rocket Lab has announced an agreement to acquire Iridium Communications, and I do want to emphasize the wording there because the acquisition has not closed yet. We're talking about a proposed transaction that remains subject to the applicable shareholder and regulatory processes. Now, according to the reporting I reviewed, the transaction, it did initially imply approximately $6 billion in equity value and $8.1 billion in enterprise value for Iridium. Now, the deal structure reportedly provides Iridium shareholders with $27 per share in cash. Oh no, did I accidentally exit out of that? Oh no, here we go. But yeah, it's offering $27. Let me get that for you. $27 per share in cash, plus a variable number of Rocket Lab shares based on Rocket Lab's stock price around the closing period. And Iridium shareholders are scheduled to vote on the transaction on September 24th. Now, the companies have indicated and expecting closing around mid-2027, subject to the necessary approvals and closing conditions. And again, expected is a different word from the word guaranteed. And this deal could face delays, financing changes, regulatory issues, or other complications. Quick reminder before we continue, if you're enjoying the content and want to connect with the community, check out the first link below for the free InvestQ community. And if you want access to advanced stock research and tools, the second link is a Prophecy 7-day trial for just $7. And last, if you want daily market updates and behind the scenes content, follow me on Instagram using the third link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. So, a good question to ask would be, why would Rocket Lab spend this kind of money? And that is where some of the third-party analysis I showed earlier could become useful, because a seeking alpha analysis from Pinthio Research argued that Rocket Lab is gradually evolving from primarily a launch and space hardware provider toward a much more vertically integrated space infrastructure company. And Iridium, it potentially adds something Rocket Lab hasn't historically had at this scale. And it's an operating communications constellation and millions of existing subscribers. And the Seeking Alpha analysis referenced approximately 2.5 million Iridium subscribers. And that could potentially give Rocket Lab exposure to recurring communications and services revenue on top of launch, spacecraft, and component revenue. But I want to make an important distinction. This is the strategic argument being made by the Seeking Alpha author, and it in no way guarantees that Rocket Lab successfully integrates Iridium or generates the financial returns that investors are expecting. In fact, an acquisition this large creates significant execution, financing, leverage, and of course, potential dilution risks. So I do see both sides. And I see both sides, and I'm taking everything from the risks and opportunities into consideration. Now, another part of the deal that is interesting to me is, according to reporting published through Stockwits and Yahoo Finance, Rocket Lab reportedly increased its offer for Iridium substantially during their negotiations. And the reporting says that Rocket Lab initially offered $42.50 per Iridium share entirely in stock, and the proposal was later increased to approximately $52, consulting of $15 cash and $37 in stock. Let me pull that up for you real quick. $42.50. There's all the information for right there. Rocket Lab offered $42.50. Raised the proposal to $52 June 3rd, which is $15 in cash and $37 in stocks. There you go. Now, next part is the final reported offer reached $54 per share, split approximately evenly between cash and stock. And satellite communications consultant Tim Ferrer argued that his argument was that Iridium was able to push Rocket Lab's offer significantly. He was able to push Rocket Lab's offer significantly higher, despite what he characterized as relatively limited competition for the assets. Now, that's his interpretation, and it's not mine. And a fact of the matter is that it's not a fact about Rocket Lab's motivation, but I do think that investors, that is a reasonable question that investors should ask would be, if Rocket Lab paying an appropriate price for the strategic value it believes Iridium provides? So that's going to take some time, and it may even take years for the question to be answered, but it's still an important question that you should be asking. And there's also speculation surrounding who else may have looked at Iridium. And Tim Ferrer suggested AST Space Mobile may have been the unidentified party B that entered due diligence but eventually withdrew. And he also suggested another party may have been Viasat. But again, what's extremely important to take into consideration is that the identities of those bidders have not yet been confirmed. So I am not presenting AST Space Mobile or Viasat's involvement as a 100% fact. That's not what I'm doing. I'm simply telling you what Tim Ferrer said. And unless additional evidence does emerge, there's nothing more that I can really say regarding that. So let's get back to what may be the single biggest operational catalyst for Rocket Lab, and that's none other than Neutron. And Rocket Lab's medium-lift reusable rocket is designed to move the company well beyond Electron's small launch market. And according to reporting surrounding management's comments, Neutron is designed to carry up to approximately 13,000 kilograms to orbit using 9 Archimedes engines, producing roughly 1.45 million pounds of combined thrust. Now, Rocket Lab continues targeting delivery of Neutron to its Virginia launch pad in Q4 of 2026. However, CEO Peter Beck has reportedly acknowledged that the window for an end-of-year launch is narrowing. And that's why I'm not going to sit here and say that Neutron is launching in December, because we don't know that. Timelines shift around, they can move, and testing can uncover problems, and a Q4 pad delivery target is exactly that, which is what I'm saying. It's nothing more than a target. Another thing to talk about is development in Neutron's reusable fairing, which is also known as Hungry Hippo. And according to reporting based on Rocket Lab's progress, Hungry Hippo has been undergoing flight-like testing, and the fairing previously completed qualification testing while reportedly withstanding approximately 275,000 pounds of force, with loads exceeding projected flight levels by roughly 25%. Now, the hardware has also received thermal protection, control surfaces, avionics, and fluid systems. And Peter Beck reportedly said that following this testing and integration with Neutron's interstage, the fairing would essentially be finished and ready for launch. Now again, that's management's reported description of the progress. It doesn't guarantee successful flight performance. And another thing was a number from the Seeking Alpha analysis that caught my attention. The author, what he referenced was 400 Archimedes hot fires. I know I said that wrong. Archimedes, sorry if I mispronounced it. But the argument being made was that Rocket Lab's challenge isn't necessarily just getting Neutron off the pad once. It's eventually reaching a repeatable launch cadence. And I actually think that that's an important distinction to make. And another thing to take into consideration, let me find that specific. Yeah. So in the headline right here, in Seeking Alpha, a lot of attention was naturally going towards Neutron's maiden launch. And specific questions that are going to be asked are if it launched, was it successful, when did it happen? But what the Seeking Alpha article does, and the author of this article, he made an interesting argument about it, because Flight 10 may ultimately matter more than Flight 1, because even if Rocket Lab successfully launches Neutron once, the company still needs to demonstrate that it can manufacture, launch, and potentially reuse these vehicles at a commercially viable cadence. Now, the author referenced management discussing a potential 1, 3, and 5 flight cadence with reusability, playing an important role. So, from my perspective, I'm not only watching whether Neutron launches, I'm watching what happens afterwards. And I'm going to be asking and looking to see whether or not Rocket Lab can repeat this process. Can they increase their cadence? Can they control costs? And can they satisfy their customers? And that's where this becomes an actual scalable business rather than simply a successful engineering demonstration. And apparently Rocket Lab isn't waiting until the first flight to sell Neutron missions, because the Seeking Alpha stated Rocket Lab has been selling Neutron launches for approximately $50 to $55 million each before the rocket has even completed its maiden flight. Now, the number, it comes from the third-party analysis, so I'm attributing it rather than presenting it as my own independent finding. And Peter Beck himself has also reportedly described demand around Neutron as extremely strong, and has said that Rocket Lab has to be selective about projects. Now, again, that's the commentary from management. But if the demand ultimately materializes as contracted missions and Rocket Lab can execute, the opportunity could be substantial. Now, here's probably one of the most interesting management comments that I've seen, because according to an August 24 report discussing comments from Rocket Lab CFO Adam Spice, Spice did say that the path to positive EBITDA, let me get that up, but the path to positive EBITDA, he does say that he has reportedly tied that pathway heavily to getting the first Neutron launch completed. And yeah, it says here, Adam Spice said that a successful Neutron test launch could move the company into positive adjusted operating territory the following quarter. That's what it says right there, according to Yahoo Finance. And in my opinion, that can be interpreted as a pretty significant statement. But I do want to emphasize something. Management's expectation, that's what this is. It's management's expectation. It's not my prediction. And again, it's not a guarantee, because we got to see the launch still happen, and the launch still needs to be successful, and the economics need to develop as expected. Now, other parts of the business need to perform as well. So I'm not telling you that Rocket Lab automatically becomes profitable after Neutron launches. What I'm telling you is what the company's CFO reportedly said about the potential path to adjusted EBITDA profitability. And there's another distinction that I think is worth making, and it's that positive adjusted EBITDA does not automatically mean positive gap net income or positive free cash flow. And Rocket Lab could reach positive adjusted EBITDA while continuing to spend significant amounts of cash on Neutron, acquisitions, infrastructure, and other investments. That is why I'm going to keep watching multiple financial metrics rather than just focusing on one sole headline. Now, let's actually go back to the article, the report for Q2 of 2026. And let's go to their balance sheet, starting off there. And when we look at the balance sheet for Rocket Lab, it currently does show that the company has significant resources, because as of June 30th of 2026, Rocket Lab reported approximately $2.13 billion in cash and cash equivalents, and it also reported approximately $172.7 million in current marketable securities. And total assets were approximately at $4.19 billion, comparing that with $2.32 billion in the previous 6 months at the end of 2025, as of December 31st, 2025. So there's also another side to the story here, because for the first 6 months of 2026, Rocket Lab used approximately $134.4 million of cash in operating activities, and the cash flow statement shows approximately $1.52 billion of net cash providing by financing activities. So that large cash position didn't simply come from the business generating billions of dollars of free cash flow. Financing has played a major role, and with a transaction as large as Iridium potentially ahead, financing structures matter even more, which brings us to concerns regarding dilution. You're going to see here that Rocket Lab reported approximately 629.7 million weighted average common shares outstanding during Q2 of 2026, compared with approximately 515.1 million during Q2 of 2025. Now, I want you to remember that that's the weighted average number used for the quarter. And on the balance sheet, Rocket Lab reported approximately 598.2 million common shares outstanding as of June 30th, compared with roughly 543.6 million at the end of 2025. Now, those are two very different share count measurements, so I don't want you guys to mix them together, but the overall point is that the share count is something investors should continue monitoring, especially if future acquisitions or capital requirements involve additional equity. Now, there's another interesting we got to talk about, because there's another headline on Yahoo Finance that I want to show you real quick. If we scroll down here, it's going to be, oh, not this one. If we scroll down here, let's see. There we go. Yeah. So if we scroll down here, you're going to see another article that may raise concerns for investors, because a recent report said that 5 Rocket Lab executives sold approximately 78,843 shares of Rocket Lab for a combined total of $5.49 million. Now, if you stopped right there, you immediately think, why are the insiders selling at such high amounts? But you got to realize one thing, is that the details do matter, because according to the filings described in the report, these were sell to cover transactions associated with tax withholding obligations from vested restricted stock units. So, in other words, these were reportedly tax-related transactions rather than executives simply deciding to unload millions of dollars of stock for discretionary profit taking. The executives repeatedly retained approximately 3.11 million shares after the transactions representing approximately 97.5% of their combined pre-sale holdings, according to the report. And I think that context is extremely important, and the headline of showing that Rocket Lab insiders sell $5.5 million worth of shares sounds pretty dramatic, But when you actually read further into the article and look at how the transactions were characterized in the filings, you can clearly see that there's a lot more context. And the transactions were reportedly made to cover tax obligations associated with vested stock awards, and 4 of the filings reportedly said the transactions occurred under Rule 10b-5-1 arrangements. So personally, I'm not going to look at that headline by itself and immediately assume that management is suddenly losing confidence in Rocket Lab. And at the same time, insider transactions are something investors can continue monitoring along with everything else. Now, another thing that I did find interesting, if we scroll down here just a little bit under the portion of the section that says Rocket Lab CEO reveals secret missions, according to the article, in this report, it starts covering about a recent tour of Rocket Lab's Long Beach facility, and Peter Beck was asked whether there were projects visitors weren't allowed to see, and his answer was simply lots, right there. Now, when discussing what was shown during the tour, Beck reportedly said, "We have a lot of national security programs, so these are sort of the missions that we can show you." Now, I want to be careful with this because me personally, I don't want to speculate about what those undisclosed programs are. And I'm not going to assign imaginary contract values to them. I'm not going to assign contract values to them. And I'm definitely not going to treat undisclosed programs as guaranteed future revenue. And all we can reasonably say, based on the publicly reported comments, is that Beck indicated Rocket Lab is involved with additional national security work that wasn't being shown during that particular tour. And considering some of the publicly announced Space Force and defense work we've already discussed, national security is definitely an area I'm going to continue watching. Now, coming back to Iridium, there is another major milestone coming up because according to the reporting that I've been looking at, Iridium filed its definitive proxy materials formally sending the proposed transaction to shareholders. And yeah, let's just go back to that part real quick. It's gonna make me scroll up just a little bit. Yeah. September. The shareholder vote is scheduled for September 4th. Yeah, right here. The September 24th. I'm sorry, not September 4th. September 24th. And under the reported terms, Iridium shareholders would receive $27 in cash plus a variable amount of Rocket Lab shares. And the stock portion changes depending on Rocket Lab's stock price around closing. And according to the report, if the specified Rocket Lab price is $67.50 or lower, Iridium holders would receive approximately 0.4 Rocket Lab shares. And between $67 and $112, let me pull this up for you real quick. $67. Yeah, so this is the part right there. So the Iridium deal heads to shareholder vote. But anyways, between $67.50 and $112.50, the exchange ratio adjusts with the goal of keeping the stock component near $27. And at $112.50 or higher, the ratio is reportedly capped at approximately 0.24 shares. Now, according to the same reporting, former Iridium shareholders are estimated to own around 5% of the combined company following completion. But again, the transaction has not closed, and a shareholder vote still has to occur. And regulatory approvals and other closing conditions matter, and financing ultimately matters as well. So I'm treating Iridium as a potentially transformational transaction and not as something that Rocket Lab already owns. And this is probably one of my biggest questions surrounding the deal. And Rocket Lab reportedly secured a $3.6 billion committed bridge facility. Now, according to the reporting, and let me pull that up for you too. I'm just jumping from one portion of the article to another. Right there. So, Rocket Lab has secured a $3.6 billion bridge facility. And according to the reporting, that could eventually be replaced with longer-term debt, equity financing, or potentially some of a combination of both. So, that's important because different financing structures have different consequences for existing shareholders. And more debt could increase leverage and interest obligations, and more equity could create additional dilution. And some combination of the two obviously creates a mixture of those risks. Now, we don't know exactly what the long-term capital structure will ultimately look like, so this is absolutely something I would monitor rather than just making assumptions. So there's also a legitimate debate surrounding how much Rocket Lab agreed to pay, because according to the Stockwitz report, satellite communications consultant Tim Farrer questioned how Iridium managed to push Rocket Lab's offer substantially higher despite what he characterized as relatively limited competition. Now, I want you all to remember the progression that we discussed earlier, because Rocket Lab reportedly started around $42.50 per share. And then that moved to approximately $52 and eventually approximately $54 per share. And the final transaction reportedly implied approximately $6 billion in equity value and $8.1 billion in enterprise value. Now, would that necessarily mean that Rocket Lab overpaid? I don't think we can definitively say that today, because if Iridium eventually creates major strategic benefits, recurring cash flows and opportunities across Rocket Lab's broader platform, management could ultimately look very smart. And if integration proves difficult or the expected economics don't materialize, investors could eventually view the price much differently. And that's something we're only going to know with time. Now, again, all my opinion, but this is starting to bring me to my personal biggest takeaway from all of this research. Is the fact that the Rocket Lab story seems to be becoming much bigger than Neutron alone. Neutron is extremely important, and I'm not minimizing it, but look at what Rocket Lab appears to be assembling. They're assembling launch, spacecraft manufacturing, satellite components, national security programs, potentially constellation operations, and also potentially recurring communication services through Iridium, and the ability to potentially design something, manufacture it, launch it, operate it, and provide services from it. That's fundamentally different. That's a fundamentally different business model than simply selling somebody a ride to orbit. So I think that's enough talking about Rocket Lab. There's probably more that I can't get into. So in the comment section, please let me know what it is you think I may have missed, what I should have covered better. And please let me know what you want to see in future upcoming videos. And if you're new to the channel, please feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, as we're getting close to the first small milestone of 1,000 subscribers, currently at 817 subs. And also, if you're looking for tools to help you with your investing journey, please feel free to check out the second link in the description below for the $7 7-day prophecy link. But besides all of that, guys, I look forward to seeing you in future upcoming videos. But besides that, stay safe and InvestQ out, and I'll see you on the next video.